everyone, and welcome to another edition of Thought Leaders Live, where we talk with thought leaders in business, life, and all points in between. And today, we've got quite a thought leader with us, Jim Fielding, executive coach, best-selling author, former president of Disney Stores Worldwide, is joining us. Jim also has written the acclaimed book, All Pride, No Ego, which chronicles his journey as a queer executive and has positioned him as a leading voice in leadership and DEI. And we're going to get into that in a little
Mm.
bit. Jim, thanks so much for joining us
Oh
today.
my gosh, Greg, thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, the name of the whole show is Living and Leading with Kindness and Authenticity. And so let's just jump right into that. Well,
Mhm.
before we do, actually, let me take a step back. Tell us a little bit, Jim, about your own personal journey and then what you're doing right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a proud Midwesterner. We were just talking about that. I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, went to Indiana University in Bloomington with the intention of going to law school and being an international lawyer. At the end of college, was out of funds, so deferred law school and went into retail, really thinking I was going to do it for 2 years. Ended up getting bitten by the retail bug, as we say, and had a nice career run with Dayton Hudson department stores and the Gap, and then got recruited by Disney in the early 2000s to run the catalog, the Disney catalog at the time. And I ended up spending 12 years at Disney, as you mentioned. The last 4 years were president of Disney Store. So I was officially in the media and entertainment business, but I was always doing retail and consumer products in in media companies. Got the opportunity to move back to the Midwest to become the CEO of Claire's stores, the girls' jewelry and ear piercing and accessory
Okay.
headquarters in Chicago, and then got called back to Hollywood again to work at DreamWorks and 20th Century Fox, where I worked right up until the pandemic. Disney bought Fox. I was out of a job. And that's really where I started the pivot that you and I were talking about. During the pandemic, I had a lot of time to think about. I knew I was entering the last chapter of my career. I really thought about what did I want to do, and what I realized is I wanted to spend more time teaching and giving back, and just being with people, young leaders, mid-career leaders. And that's kind of where the book came from. First, the book kind of started it all. The book came out in fall of 23 and hit the bestseller list, which you mentioned, and kind of created speaking opportunities and training opportunities that I was not anticipating. And I decided to go back to school. So I went back to school in 2024 at Emory to get my executive coaching credentials. And that's kind of where we are today, is coaching and writing and speaking and doing my podcast. And really, for the first time in my life, basically being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, whatever you call it, not corporate. I mean, I was 35 plus years corporate. And I've spent the last 4 years now really on this new path, on this new chapter. It's fun. It's
How
exciting.
how compare your nervous system between the corporate life and the entrepreneur life? Because I think there's like, different aspects
For
of the roller
sure.
coaster ride.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I corporate life for me was intense and high pressure. I was in present roles, senior leadership roles. It was 24/7, 365 days a year. Like
Mm.
it was, and it was, I always had global responsibility. So it was a ton of travel, which I loved. And I was traveling around the world. I had teams in Asia and South America and Europe and Australia, New Zealand. And so I my calendar in corporate life was planned like in 18 and 24-month increments, which you understand, Greg, right? Because it was like I knew I had to get around the world. I knew when major conferences were. I knew when major product launches were, films, television, things like that. Um, the entrepreneur life is stressful, but it's a different kind of stress. It's business development stress that you and I were talking about. It's listen, I have my own accounts payable and accounts receivable department, so it's chasing people down for invoices. I love all of you that are watching this, but sometimes you forget to pay. Um, it's learning, I was at a point in my life where I had a big team around me, assistants and finance departments and graphic departments, and I've learned to be much more independent and do things myself and use freelancers where I need freelancers. I've developed a really nice network of freelancers and kind of temp employees that help me, when I need it. Um, but I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be right now. And it doesn't mean I get asked all the time, would I ever go back to corporate? And I always say maybe because I don't know. Like maybe for the right role, I would go back. But right now, I'm really enjoying this.
That's good. That's good. And I think you've got so many years of experience and so much to offer
Mm,
to the people who are still in the corporate setting.
yes.
It's good that you're on this side and you've got a little perspective too. It's probably healthy that way.
I would hope so.
Let's talk a little bit about living and leading with kindness
Mm.
and authenticity. Not something we see a ton of today in, in
We
so
don't have
many
a lot
ways.
of role models. You're being kind. You're being kind. Yes. Yeah, it's listen, when I wrote the book and I had the time to like hold a mirror up to myself, I never really realized that I had a leadership style, right? It just was like, this is how Jim leads. But as I was doing research and reading other people's books and, doing research on the internet about different types of leadership, I really Howard Schultz's book, the founder of Starbucks, was really, really important to me, and he really talked about servant leadership, which was, putting the needs of the team before your own needs. I'm way summarizing servant leadership, but you know what it means. And so what I realized is that, and I had through my whole career in my reviews and stuff, I've been told I'd led more with EQ than IQ, that I had a strong IQ, but that I was an EQ leader. I was known for being a team builder. I was known for being a culture builder. I was known for being a developer of people. Like people would come in at lower levels in my team and I would work with them to move them up in the organization. And Disney, in full credit to them for the 12 years I spent them, Disney invested in executive education. We went through a lot of training and seminars at Disney. Um, because they really believed in talent assessment planning and succession planning. And they put us through a lot of really, really high quality training. And I had an executive coach at Disney. Um, and I remember when my boss gave me my executive coach, Greg, I was like, oh my God, what did I do? Right. I was like, I screwed up. Right. And he's like, no, 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 no. This is us investing in you. Like, we're actually giving you this coach. It's when I became president of Disney Store because we know that this is a high pressure job and we think it's important for you to have an executive coach. And I ended up having the same coach for all 4 years, those last 4 years of my career at Disney as president of Disney Store. Um, so I I realized as I was writing the book that I have always led with EQ. I've always led with compassion and kindness, but most importantly, I've led with authenticity, and I believed that my job as a leader or manager of human beings was to create physically and psychologically safe spaces for people to thrive in. And that meant all people, all ages, all backgrounds, all colors, all educations, all gender identities, all sexualities, all sexes. I wanted to create an environment where people brought me their best. And again, I worked for Disney. We had really aggressive goals. I worked for DreamWorks, same thing. I had to make my numbers, but my thought was I would make my numbers if I created that environment because I would get the best out of everybody, um, regardless of anything, age, background, education, all that. And so I was managing diversity before we ever kind of put a label on it, right? I mean,
Right.
before we ever said DEI, what I would, and again, because I had global responsibility, I was managing people in China and Japan and Australia, and you couldn't manage everybody the same way because of cultural backgrounds.
Let me ask you something here because as you were talking, I was thinking about EQ. You mentioned EQ, and
Mhm.
done a lot of reading on that myself over the
Yes.
last few years, and Gary Vaynerchuk talking about
Amazing.
empathy. Empathy is a superpower.
Yes.
And my question for you is, I think a lot of people who don't embrace EQ probably haven't tried it yet, right?
Yes.
So, maybe they haven't developed those skills or they haven't spent a
Or
lot
they're
of
not
time on it.
comfortable with it, to be
They're not
honest.
comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen anybody get strong with their EQ skills and then go, this isn't working. I'm going back to
Oh
the
my
old
god,
ways.
this is such a good question. I love this. You know what? I haven't. I mean, I think I even in my coaching practice, I've coached some people to be stronger in their EQ skills. And so I've watched them being uncomfortable, which is why I managed it. And I've watched them, a lot of times I'll go in person and watch them with their teams to see how they lead a team meeting and things like that. Um, but I've never had anybody say, nope, you know what? I'm going to go back to being a dictator in the corner office, right? Like
Right.
it, because they realize, especially today where we have, relatively low unemployment, there's a competition for talent, particularly in the big cities. I was in LA for a long time. If you're in New York, LA, San Francisco, there is a competition for talent. And a lot of these, particularly the younger generations coming out of grad school right now and undergrad, if they're not motivated and happy and respected and listened to, they're not going to stay. They will go somewhere else, or they'll go start their own thing, or they'll just maybe go back to school. They won't stay. I think in my generation, there was still a lot of us that thought we were going to work at one or two companies our entire life and like get our gold watch and our retirement benefits. And I think the younger generation is like, I don't care if I work for 30 different companies in my career, as long as I feel respected and rewarded and that I'm, learning and growing. So I think I've never had anybody backpedal once they've gone, but I've seen how hard it is for some people to do.
Sure.
People who have and by the way, I think every leader needs a high degree of IQ too. You have to be smart.
Sure.
Like you're not going
Absolutely.
to be in that position if you're not technically smart or have technical job knowledge and
Table
functional
stakes.
knowledge. Totally. That's the entry. Um and I never ask anybody, I'm not asking, like I say to them, I'm not asking you to dumb down to become an EQ. Like I'm balancing your IQ and EQ. I never got rewarded or promoted in my career if I wasn't technically and functionally ready for that next job. It wasn't like they were like, "Oh, he's a nice guy, let's give him that job." Mm-mm.
And I also think that the whole EQ is distorted a little bit because we get
Yeah,
that the word alone, the
yeah,
emotions,
yeah,
everybody thinks it's this touchy-feely thing all the time. You know,
totally.
Daniel
Like,
Goleman wrote about emotional intelligence and said it's really about self-control. So it's like
yes,
we love the cool hand Luke quarterback who is just cold-blooded and under
yeah.
control driving his team down for a Super Bowl win, but people don't get that connection, and that's what we're talking about with emotional
Mhm.
intelligence as well.
Yeah, and I think I love that you brought up, Mr. Goldman, who again I respect so much, because that's a little bit of like, the title of my book, All Pride, No Ego. And people say to me all the time, well, of course you have ego. Yes, I have ego, but I learned how to control the ego.
Yeah.
Right. And that's literally what the book is about is I have pride, I have self-esteem, I have control issues sometimes, but I had to learn how to control the ego and how to work through my team, not on my team, right? I had to learn how to create these environments where great ideas were coming from everywhere. And I was just creating these environments, particularly again in creative industries. I mean, I was working in retail and I was working in media and entertainment, and good ideas could come from anywhere. And I've always been a two heads are better than one kind of person anyway. But I loved getting and I grew up physically, let's be clear. I grew up pre-pandemic, I really managing in offices. I loved putting 10, 15, 20 people in a room and seeing what would come out of that. Like,
Wow.
I loved that. All different kinds of people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and creating environments where you truly were blue skying or brainstorming. I loved that.
And to do that, I think, you talked a lot about creating a safe space
Mm,
because that is a pretty scary situation for a lot of people to go into
very.
that big room and try and brainstorm.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about before we talk a little, we're going to circle back to
Mhm.
authenticity, but
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about creating that safe space.
Well, I mean, again, I think some of these leadership and management principles have been around since the dawn of the industrial age. But, the managing by walking around and the walk and talk the talk, right? It's so much about you have to realize when you're leading human beings, and it doesn't matter if you're leading two people, 20 people, 2,000 people. At one point in my life, I think I had 40,000 employees at Claire's. You're on display, right? You're on display. They are watching everything you're doing and what you're writing and what your emails are saying. Like everything is hyper analyzed. And you have to be consistent and you have to show them that you truly are going to create an environment where you will accept ideas from everywhere. And by the way, the buck stops with you when you're leading these people. And there were times the group might have said red and I would still end up having to go with blue because I just felt like blue. But I would always explain the context of why I made that decision that way. And I would look at all these opportunities as teachable moments for them and for me.
It sounds like you're being very authentic in those moments. Tell us a little bit about how that authenticity transforms a team and an organization.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain like authentic phrases. And again, in my coaching practice and training practice, I do this. It's like I would go into meetings and be like, I don't have the answer. Like, just being honest enough to be like, and vulnerable enough to be like, here, we have this problem, we have this opportunity. I don't know what the answer is. So I'm putting all of us in a room to figure out. And oh, by the way, in this room, I'm a participant, I'm not the boss. Right. So don't sit and wait for me to say blue and then everybody else jump on and say, oh, yeah, yeah, blue. Right. Like, I really want to hear, do you like red? Do you like green? Do you like yellow? Do you like orange? Why? And again, a lot of this is through consistency because it doesn't happen overnight. And I always tell people a lot of it starts in the hiring process. And one of the things I did at Disney and DreamWorks and Fox, particularly the back half of my career, I I would spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes with every person who was going to be hired onto the team. They would only get to me after they'd been through everybody else's interview, right? And so, but I wanted to have an authentic connection with them before they showed up on day one. Like
Sure.
I wanted to spend, even if it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just to learn their story a little bit. So the first day they showed up on the team in orientation, I would have already made a connection with them and that they would understand the culture and the mission and vision of what we were trying to accomplish. And again, we were working in high pressure environments. Like when we were hiring you, we needed you. Like it wasn't like there was a lot of extra headcounts sitting around and we were
Mm.
just adding. Like every headcount was so critical that I needed people to hit the ground running basically on day one. And I needed them to understand where did they fit into the big picture? That's the biggest thing about big company cultures is it's really easy to feel like a widget in a machine.
Sure.
So I would work really hard to make sure people understood, even entry level, right out of college, marketing interns. I needed them to understand where did they fit in the overall puzzle.
Let's talk a little bit about this term you brought up, radical kindness in
Mm,
show description. Tell
yeah.
me about radical kindness.
Well, you'll understand because we were talking about this environment that we're living in. I added the word radical in 2025, to be honest,
Mm,
because I felt like kindness wasn't enough. Like I literally needed to amp it up. It's like to me, radical kindness is kindness on steroids, right? And it's funny and it's sad to me in a way that I've had to do that. Um, as a Midwesterner, I was raised on the golden rule, do unto others as you would do unto you. And we were very concerned about our community and our neighbors. And we are living, regardless of where you fall in the political spectrum, you have to acknowledge that we're living in a very polarized, divisive time. And there's a lot of anger. I mean, all you have to do is walk through an airport to see the anger, right? I always say airports and like hospitals are like great places to see how angry people are.
Right.
And I even bought, like, I buy sweatshirts now with messages on it, like, "Be kind to yourself" on the front, or, I have the one where it says, "The person in front of you values you and thanks you for being the human that you are," right? And I cannot tell you how many people stop me and say, "Thank you for wearing that sweatshirt," because
Wow.
they know why I'm wearing it, right? Because I tell my clients this all the time. I tell the students that I work with at, Indiana and Emory. I work with a couple different universities. I think it's a really hard time to be a leader right now. There's constant change. Things are outside of your control, right? Tariffs, wars, inflation, like all of these things going on. And as a leader, you literally wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, what now? Like, what do I have to deal with now? Wait a minute. And it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 45 or 65. We're seeing things we've never seen before. We're seeing new inputs and new external factors that we've never had before. And I just think that's why I added the word radical. It's like I've got to step it up. And I post so much about it on LinkedIn now and Instagram and in my newsletter because I just don't take it for granted that people even understand what kindness is, right? Because I see it every day. And I just flew back. I flew back from a trip and was in airports for a long time on Sunday. And we all know, right, currently there's a lot going on. The TSA is not getting paid and the FAA, people are not in great moods. And there were so many flight cancellations and delays and everything else. And you could just see so much anger and so much nerves and insecurity. And I hate that. And I'm not saying I can change all that, but I just feel like using my platforms, I have to get us back to kindness. So that's where radical came from.
Well,
Is I
thank
somehow that makes me a radical now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a radical, and we need
Yeah.
more of it. I was talking to an influencer the other day, and he put up a post about something that happened to him at the airport. Somebody was
Mm,
watching their movie on their phone, and it was irritating him. And he put up a post about it on LinkedIn and about how rude the guy was. And he's like, I totally was grudgingly going to post it because I knew it would inspire rage amongst everybody, and they'd be like,
mhm.
"Oh, what a jerk," and he's like and it sure enough, it just went viral, and he's like,
Yeah.
"All the al algorithms are based on rage," and so for you to, like, kinda
Oh, it's
you're fighting
horrible.
the algorithm,
It
much
is.
less,
It is,
human
and
nature.
like they tell you, if you talk to anybody who's like a guru on LinkedIn, they'll say, "Oh, you have to have a more provocative headline. You have to have a more contrarian point of view." Like basically stoking, like poking the bear, right? Like
Yes.
stoking anger. And I just it's just not the world I think any of us want to live in, right? I just think we don't want to move through life with this constant edge. And it doesn't mean that I don't get angry, by the way. And I do. And believe me, I address it. If something happens to me and something I'm wronged in some way, I address it. But I do hope, you know, call me an optimist. I say this all the time. I probably used to be an internal optimist. I would never be a pessimist. I think this current situation has turned me into a pragmatist and a realist that I realize how hard it is for people right now. And especially federal workers and people who aren't getting paychecks and things like that. Like that then you're getting into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes.
If people cannot put food on the table and pay for shelter over their head, like all other bets are off. Like I'm not going to go in and start talking about let's treat each other with kindness when people literally can't put food on the table. Um,
That's a good
but
point.
and I feel that. And I think again, I'm just trying to use my platforms, whatever they are, to spread a little bit of a message of kindness and authenticity.
Well, geez, I mean, you're doing it for everybody else, but you gotta do it for yourself too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, of
You
course,
gotta make those.
self-care.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. So, let me ask you something. We're getting close to the end
Sure.
here, but w you're an executive coach. What is the role of the executive coach
Mm.
in delivering this authenticity, and how can it be done? Can you give us some, not only what is their role, but how do they deliver it?
It's a great question again, Greg. And I think it's one of the biggest things for me in coaching when I went back to school is when you're a coach, you are not a therapist, you are not a consultant, you are not an advisor, you are a coach, which means and they tell us that in any coaching sessions, the client should be talking 75 to 80% of the time. You're talking 20 to 30. And I'm not really offering solutions. I'm not
Right.
saying this is how you should do it. What I'm doing, and most people will know if they've ever been coached, we can get annoying. I'm trying to ask a lot of really good questions. I'm trying to ask thought-provoking questions to get the client in the space because the reality is they have the solution internally. I'm just
Mm,
trying to help bring it out. And and by the way, each coaching relationship, whether it's an individual or a group, is unique and bespoke. Like there's not one way to coach. There's not I here's the gym formula and I just plug and play, right? Each one of my clients is different and they're at different ages, they're at different stages in their life, the things they want to work on. And I mean, like a perfect example of executive coaching, like usually the first question when the coaching session starts is, what do you want to work on today? Like you literally ask the client. Sometimes they want to work on something technical. Sometimes they want to work on something team building. Sometimes they'll say, hey, I'm just struggling with this personal. And it'll go a more personal way, right? I have a lot of stress at home right now and I'm carrying it over into work. And and throughout the session, you keep checking back in with a client and saying, are we accomplishing what you wanted to accomplish today? One of the things you do as a coach, most coaching sessions, most people know are like 50 minutes to an hour, similar to a therapy session. And one of the things you have to do as a coach is say, okay, we can't accomplish three things today. So pick one. And we're really going to dive into that one topic. And then we'll save those other issues for another session.
sure.
Um, but for me, of course, I prepare for my sessions and I look back at notes and I look back at my notes and think of previous sessions with clients. But honestly, when I turn on the Zoom or I meet with them in person, I don't really know what we're going to talk about because again, that first question is, what do you want to talk about today? This is your time. What do you want to work on?
So, I'm gonna direct you back to that question though,
Yeah.
because I know you're a coach, and I know my wife's a coach too. She's a
Yes.
parent coach, and she wants them to come up with their own
On
solution.
solutions for
And
sure.
so, if you are an executive and you're thinking about, man, I want to be more authentic in my
Hmm.
approach, I want to do what Jim's talking about and deliver authenticity.
Yeah.
What are some of the questions you're going to ask to kind of bring that to the surface?
Yeah. I'll ask them, do you feel that you bring your full authentic self to work every day? And if the answer is no, then why? Like what are you not sharing? Whatever it is that you're not sharing. Um, what is holding you back from bringing your full authentic self would be another way to ask that, right? Is there something that's holding you back? Have you kind of asked this question earlier, Greg? Have you ever tried to be more authentic and how did that feel? Right? Did it work? Did it not work? Why? Like you're trying to get them to be a storyteller. You're trying to get them
Right.
to tell, like you never, it's all the classic, you don't ask close-ended questions, like no questions that can be answered yes or no. Like you have to ask open-ended questions that people have to discuss with you or tell you a story. Um, a lot of times with senior executives, I'll ask them if they've ever had a 360 review, where they've been reviewed by the people that work for them and their peers and around them. And if not, I'll encourage them to do a 360. I'll
Mm,
ask them tell me what has been said in your previous performance reviews by your boss. Like, tell me your strengths and tell me, like, a lot of it is like strengths and weaknesses and developmental opportunities. But I like to see a lot, to me, authenticity and leading with authenticity is a lot tied to self awareness and knowing what you're good at and knowing what you're not good at. And listen, we all have developmental opportunities. None of us are perfect.
Right.
And so I like to kind of test, especially early on with the client, for their self-awareness. How much time do they really spend on themselves?
Right. We're at the 12 o'clock, the new mark
Yes.
here. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure.
All right, because I know we put it in the notes, and I wanted to talk about diversity,
Mm,
DEI for a second, because you and I were talking about it before the show. Let's dive into this. It's a hot potato,
mm.
but I think we were both agreeing on what the
Yeah.
important thing is with it. Talk to me a little bit about diversity and the importance of it.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I was managing diversity before it ever got the acronym, right? I mean, and I never thought DEI was performative, like counting how many people did I have of different races or different genders. Like I never thought that was DEI. I thought DEI was really about creating high performing teams and cultures and acknowledging that human beings, like snowflakes, are all truly unique and that one size does not fit all in leadership and management, and that you needed to adapt your style to your team. And in fact, one of the classes I went through at Disney, I mentioned, was called situational leadership. And I think I went through that class in like 2002 or 2003, which was literally about adapting your communication, your leadership style, your management style to individuals or to teams. And that to me was managing diversity. That to me, and I always saw it as a competitive advantage because when you look at the demographics and psychographics, particularly of the US work population, if you're not managing diversity, you're not going to be competitive because there's no way that you're going to have this homogeneous, everybody look the same workforce. I don't care, again, if you have 4 people, 40 people, or 400 people. By nature, you put 4 human beings in a room, you've got 4 different stories, 4 different backgrounds. And you need to acknowledge that and work with that. And to me, leaders and teams and companies that do that have a competitive advantage.
Well, I mean, let's just put it in business terms. Peter Drucker in The Effective Executive talked
Yes.
about playing to people's strengths. So,
Yes.
just by that definition, we're all different. We all have different strengths.
Hmm.
You have to be diverse.
You
You have
have
to
to.
be.
You have to. It's that to me is like, first off, I think it's the right. I talk about this all the time, Greg. You and I were talking about this before we got on air. I think it's the right thing to do because again, I'm a humanist. I care about human beings. But I also think it's the competitive thing to do because
Yeah,
I'm also a capitalist.
yeah.
And I worked in LA for over 20 years in media and entertainment. It was a bloodbath for talent. Like people would get poached all the time. But here's what you and I both know, and there's been tons of research on this: McKinsey, Harvard Business School, Harvard Business Review. People do not leave a job because of compensation or benefits. They leave a job because of the environment and not being managed correctly. And
Wow.
I felt like to hold on, it wasn't about paying people more. It
Yeah.
wasn't about throwing $5,000 bonuses around or giving them more vacation time. At the end of the day, human beings want to come to a place where they feel respected, safe, listened to, and where they're going to grow. Most human beings want to grow. Like they don't want to come in and do the same thing every day for 20 years. They don't.
Okay.
And so I think that's why it's also a competitive advantage.
I'm going to send us into double overtime if you got
Okay, sure.
time for one more question. You're
Double
too good,
overtime.
man. You're too good.
Double overtime.
Okay. So you just talked about employee retention.
Mm.
Speak to me about the executives. If they are authentic, how can that influence their recruiting and retention efforts?
Oh, it's huge because we also know, and again, you know this so well. There's tons of data. Like the cost of replacing an employee is very, very high. Like the lost productivity of somebody resigning, um, and the search and looking for the replacement and all that kind of stuff. And so there are dollars and cents all over the place attached to this. But the I think to me, one of the examples I gave earlier is getting involved in the interviewing and the hiring process and the recruiting process as a leader, as an executive. Again, I never made the final decision because particularly when you get higher in the organization, you have leaders underneath you who are making the final decision. But I wanted to have that authentic connection with a person that was coming onto the team. Even if they were transferring internally from another department within the big company, I still wanted them to understand that you're now part of this team. This is what this team stands for. This is what we work on. This is how we work. And it's not only talking about what we do, it's how we do it, right? And that we are a team that respects collaboration and respects communication and respects community. And I found that spending 15 or 20 minutes, and I coach on this with all quote new hires. The other thing is, depending on the company, if there's like a day one orientation, I would always try to be in the office on those days of the day one orientation. And I would just pop in and say good morning, right? I would just say, hi, welcome. We're thrilled you're here. And I truly was thrilled they were there because
Yeah.
I knew I needed them to be successful. There was no way if I had, it didn't matter if they were in finance or marketing or product development or store design or store operations, they had a role to fill. And I wanted them to bring their best and their brightest every day.
Well, fantastic, Jim. Thank you so much for
Thank
going into
you.
double overtime today.
Overtime, double
I,
overtime.
I think we're all winners here in this game.
Yeah,
So, really enjoyed the conversation. If
me
somebody
too.
wants to work with you and learn more about your approach
Yeah,
and mention the book as well to us,
yeah.
how do they get a hold of you? And what's the name of your book again?
The name of the book is All Pride, No Ego: A Career Executive's Journey to Living and Leading Authentically, available wherever fine books are sold. And the easiest way to find me is Jim Fielding on LinkedIn or my website, which is hijimfielding.com, hijimfielding.com. There are links on my LinkedIn and on the website where you can book time with me. It really is me. It's not a bot. And so if you go on there and send me an email, I will respond.
The authentic Jim Fielding will
It
get
is
back to you.
me. It is me.
Okay, thanks again, Jim,
Thank
and
you. Thanks so
thank
much for having me.
yeah, you bet, and thank you everyone for joining us today.